that was the first multi-market expansion. Kim Vonnek was on board at that point. Darren Lewin, who later on would play a pretty significant role, was on board at that point. And that was, I don't remember when in '92, but that was sort of the first market outside of Houston that the company expanded to.
The Cowboys won the Super Bowl in the next 2 years.
I mean, for perspective, these first two markets, they both have 100 stores in them each now, which, you know, we'll get to it, but it was until 1998 that we had 100 stores in the entire chain, and now to have 100 stores in each of our two first markets is pretty compelling. So as I recall the story, it was around '94 that another Steve joined the picture as a rep for Stearns & Foster, a young kid out of Houston named Steve Stagner, and he was living in Dallas at the time and calling on multiple accounts for the Stearns & Foster, or for the Sealy Company at the time, but one of his accounts was Mattress Firm, and one of Mattress Firm's hotshot managers in Dallas was a guy by the name of Darren Lewin, who had been hired after Kim, but not too far after it. He went with Kim and Sully up to Dallas. And Steve and Darren became really good friends, discovered they had a lot in common. They were right about the same age. They you know, grew up in different parts of the country, but just really sort of connected. And sort of much like Paul Harry and Steve a decade before them, they got to thinking that this was something they might be able to do. And so they began the inner workings of their business plan. And to hear Paul, Harry, and Steve talk about it, it was the most complex and thick and sort of well thought out business plan they had ever seen. You know, started on a cocktail napkin, but ended up being this sort of massive composition of you know, market analysis and spreadsheets and that sort of thing. And so they pitched the idea, I think in '95, they pitched the idea of opening up in Atlanta. Didn't have, Corey talked about Paul, Harry, and Steve having $15,000 between them. Darren and Steve had a combined $1,300 between them, but a hell of a business plan, and they talked the founders into basically floating them a $400,000 loan and letting them go out, and there was a great push to get to Atlanta before the Olympics of '96 got there. That was a real sort of critical date to get in and get situated, and they opened up, I think, March 23rd of 1996. What was the first store? Was it Snellville or? No, North Point was the first lease signed, but
first store that they opened, that they actually sold, I thought it was
Lawrenceville. Yeah. Darren and Steve opened as the Elite franchise. That was the one of, at that point, 4 or 5 franchises of Mattress Firm. And we can go back to the specific years, but from my recollection, that 95 to 98, 99 really was a period of explosive growth in terms of market counts opening. I joined the company myself in '98, and I joined the way that we code our markets is the first set of numbers designates the sort of the time that the market's open. And so if you just look at the timeline from '86 to '96, 10 years for 7 markets, Atlanta being the 7th market, I joined Greensboro, which was the 17th market. So in literally 2 years' time, just the market count had grown exponentially. And for me, that I was actually at our 100th store celebration. I started in June 1st of '98, and in August of '98 in Garner, North Carolina, was the Mattress Firm's 100th store opening. And I don't know if we're still in there that store or not today, but that was a pretty neat event. We were Sealy only at the time, and you had all the big wigs from Sealy in, and the founding fathers, and you know, for somebody who'd been with the company for 2 months, it was neat to make the long drive over from Greensboro and go celebrate that. And it was interesting that the company had taken, I've said this often, but a dozen years to get to 100 stores. And as you look just ahead, a couple years later, we were celebrating our 250th store less than 2 years later, and obviously you know where we've become today. We'll get to those stories too, but there's a lot left out, but it's where I think a few more people in this room started joining in as well.